I was probably not looking for a life partner per se. Some dates that are going to be terrible from the moment the person shows up because they may look very different from the pictures in the apps.
So what's the worst date that you've been on?
There are a few.
Do you have like any icks or like red flags?
Even I was like, marriage. Like, that's just an institution. So she found the ring that I was trying to hide from her, and I was like, damn.
Hello and welcome to Love Handle, a series where we get unfiltered about love and relationships. So our guest today is a high achiever who took his love life in his own hands, committed to the process and found his life partner after 7 years of search. Hi Vivek, we're thrilled to have you on Love Handle.
Happy to be here.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Vivek Nandur. I guess I'm a doctor, but not the kind that actually would help someone. And I'm doing my postdoc at the University of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I guess I'm a super nerd who can't leave the university. So I'm destined to be a professor.
Okay.
And I recently got married last year after probably going on 100+ dates. And my wife, Cori Nandur, we've been married a year and a half.
And before we talk about your partner, I really want to understand you first. Like, how did you know that you were ready to get married?
I don't think I knew that I was ready to get married. It's more like, as cliche as it sounds, when you find the person who everything clicks, it's just like the obvious choice.
Okay, so when you were going on these days, like what did you have in mind? Like, were you looking for a life partner or were you looking for something short term?
I would say I was probably not looking for a life partner per se. I was like deep in the throes of the PhD depression that anybody who has done a PhD knows all about, and needing, I guess, some support through that. But again, when I met my wife, and this was 10 days before the COVID lockdown.
Oh, okay.
Things just, it wasn't a bad time for us.
When you were using these apps, like what was going through your mind?
I guess everybody wants some connection, right? And that's what I was looking for. But the level of that connection varies widely. And you'll have some dates that are going to be terrible from the moment the person shows up because they may look very different from the pictures in the apps, and others that are on the other end of the spectrum. And
did you have any issues while looking for your life partners? Maybe through, these dating apps or otherwise?
Issues. Except for not finding one for like a really long time. I guess that was the main issue.
So when you were using these dating apps or going out on dates, did you learn anything about these apps or about yourself? For
sure. I found that the girl that would jive best with me was one that was open-minded, but also somebody who valued education. These sort of like juxtapositions that most people don't maybe fall into. And then I guess a girl also has to put up with me. So maybe that's why it took 100 dates.
So what's the worst date that you've been on?
There are a few, but I'll say one in particular where, again, it's very common. I'm sure it's common today, where girls, and again, I can only speak to girls' profiles because I only looked at girls' profiles. I'm sure guys are doing this too, where they are really like taking angles and filters and making themselves look very different from how they do in reality. So when you meet this person and you're like excited to like go on this date and you've been texting and things are going great, and then you meet and it's like, yeah. And so that can start like the downward trajectory. And then this girl, like, she didn't even really say hi or how are you. She just went on a rant about the exact kind of guy that her parents were looking for. She's like, my parents, they need to have this, and for like 2 minutes straight without even.
Right. So would you say like this journey was frustrating for you?
I mean, there was cost to it. cost, not in like the monetary sense, in like the time sense.
Right.
But I can't view it as frustrating because at the end, I feel like I won.
So when you met your partner, how was the first date?
Well, let's just say it was a Wednesday evening and we said, okay, we're only going to have one drink. And that was like at 8 p.m. But we ended up staying out till like 2 a.m. So it's like one of those classic things.
So it was like the conversation was flowing. There were no awkward silences.
Yeah.
And how did you know like she's the one?
Again, it's hard to escape the cliches. Like when you know, you know. It's just a feeling that is so different from all the other dates that because we just connected at such a level where we had a bunch of similar interests, but then in other ways we were like the perfect yin and yang.
So did you have a checklist?
Not like some obvious checklists like being employed or like, things like that. For sure, I was very analytical about it. And to me, the first sort of filtering I was doing, and again, I'm sure I sort of erred in this way, and people can quibble with it, but at least for me, the fastest way to go about doing this and having a preference for education was like looking for the university degree on the profile. And so that was like my first sort of thing that I was looking at. And then trying to see over time, I told you, I like sort of learned this, like these angles and these filters. So then I looked for girls who didn't have that. But I just tried to keep an open mind because, of course, this is just like some dinky profile that hopefully you didn't spend too much time trying to curate. And, the experience in person is going to way outweigh any profile. So other than having a university degree, I tried to be pretty open-minded.
So you mentioned dating apps. Did you ever explore like other avenues to meet people?
No, I never considered the arranged marriage. My parents actually were a love marriage. And so, I mean, their story is worth me probably telling, which is like they met in grad school in Mysore in like the 70s and like dated underground when dating wasn't a thing. And they were both the first ones to get like love marriaged. And they went, against their parents' wishes. It was like a classic Bollywood story. So they were always very open-minded with me and never pressured me or anything like that.
So you never like hired a matchmaker or
No. But I understand again why somebody would do that. But no, I don't.
Do you have like any icks or like red flags that?
Yeah, I do. Probably somebody who cares about their like social media image more than their like actual image. Again, this is my own preference. But again, somebody who isn't able to put away a phone and like be present for an extended period of time. Yeah, I guess those are. I mean, I understand their reality, but it's like there are certain times where you just want to be immersed in that moment. And yeah, it's just a crazy like killing of the vibe if like, oh, whoa, like in the middle of a conversation. So like if I did that right now, how would you feel? I don't think you'd feel very good.
So you both practice different religions. Tell us more about that.
So I wouldn't describe myself as religious per se. But again, the Eastern concept of religion is just so different from the Western concept of, for an Eastern person, I would consider myself religious, but to what a Western person considers, if that makes sense. So, and there are just so many, I think, real deep truths of Buddhism and Hinduism and Jainism that like about the suffering being rooted at yourself. And once you sort of remove the self, you remove the suffering. A lot of that, I think she's very into that and wants to learn more about. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm. How long did you date before getting married?
Well, it was 3 years, but it was 3 COVID years. So that's like 10 years. And so, and especially in Canada, where the lockdown was very serious. They even locked up the tennis courts, which I'm still pissed about.
So did anything change after getting married?
Not really, but somehow also yes. It's very hard to describe. I guess a sense of security that even I was like, marriage, like that's just an institution, know. But no, it does like leave you feeling a different way.
What's your favorite quality about her?
There's so many. She's very patient because she puts up with me a lot. I guess her just boundless empathy. I find that like super refreshing. Probably the biggest thing I learned from her is just really how to work very hard, because the amount of work she does compared to me is astounding. I mean, she does like all of her paid work, but then there's all sorts of work she does at home, which is, never talked about. But she is just sort of superwoman, doing all of this and, still having time to be creative and do all these other things. So like witnessing that day in and day out is frankly inspiring. And I think the sad part about many guys who are single is they somehow just don't get that. Don't get, at least in my case, a sense of what that is to really be sort of burning the fuse all the time and how difficult that is. And, hopefully, I can do more,
So you would say that professionally you've also grown after being with her?
For sure. Because, I mean, we come from sort of very different, like work backgrounds. Her job is one where she has tons of meetings all day. In academia, it's definitely not like that. And even my like output is very non-linear. So there'll be some days where I don't do anything because I don't make any progress on my research, say. But then there are some days where it all like goes like in an hour. I could do like more than I did in like a week before. So that part of it, I think, was an adjustment for both of us, because I'm like, wait, you were in like 5 hours of meetings, like back to back to back to back. I can't even process that. And then she's just like looking at me, like staring off into space and like, are you working?
Yeah. So how do you maintain like work-life balance?
So one, again, we're lucky in that both of us work fully remote.
Oh, okay.
So like I don't really have to take vacations. I sort of just am always vacationing, but always working. So for me, like not being tied to one place and being like this digital nomad is very refreshing. And I can see a lot of friends and family and never have to sort of worry about that. And then we both love nature and love getting outside. So we always have that sort of joking debate of who's more outdoorsy. And I'm like, well, obviously I'm more outdoorsy. I'm out playing tennis every day. And then she would say, well, that's not being outdoorsy just because you're outdoors.
Yeah. And in the initial phase of the courtship period, how did you evaluate your compatibility?
It's interesting because in all sorts of movies and TV shows, people try and describe this spark. And then you see all of these sort of academic types saying like, oh, don't look for the spark, that's blah, blah. But we totally had that spark. So I can't give any advice other than it was just like magic from the beginning.
And how did you propose?
It was in Berlin at the Brandenburg Gate. So the proposal is an interesting thing because if you're really close with somebody, you can't keep any object away from this other person. I mean, this is somebody you're with 24/7. So she found the ring that I was trying to hide from her, and I was like, oh, damn. And then she knew that we had this sort of elaborate trip to Europe planned, but I wanted to pick a location that was sort of important in its cultural significance and its historical significance. So I chose the Brandenburg Gate, which is sort of the opening to Berlin, which is, of course, one of the best cities on earth. That's just fact. Yeah, and rest is history. But she's super like into Indian culture and wants to learn about sort of Eastern philosophy, which I would say I'm more in tune with that than like religion per se. But she spent 6 months with a dance teacher before our wedding learning Bharatanatyam.
Wow. Was it like an elaborate proposal, or just the two of you in an intimate setting?
Yeah, it wasn't really more elaborate than going to Berlin and, but yeah, to me, that's elaborate.
Yeah. So when you were ready to get married, was it a Hindu wedding or was it a white wedding, or you had...
It was like a blend. We had a baraat, but we wanted to sort of flip the script and make it not, so misogynistic. And we actually had her come in on the horse.
Okay.
So thought that was cool. And then we had like a traditional Western wedding. And then the next morning was the Hindu ceremony.
That's so amazing. Did you face any pushback from the families on either side?
No. I think my parents were like, oh my God, you found a girl who, can put up with all of your crap. So that's, we have nothing to say. So.
And what about her family?
Her family is very different in a lot of ways. I mean, one, in my family is huge. My dad has 8 siblings. My mom has 3 siblings. So it's, cousin brothers and sisters forever. But her family is very small. So it's got a bit of different dynamics going on. But I think she likes the big family vibe. So
is there anything that you have learned from her culture or she has learned from yours?
I think she's learned a lot about food because one very different thing is in our culture, of course, like sharing a meal is, I think sharing the meal part is part of theirs as well, but it's more the cooking of the meal is a big part of our culture. And that is not at all something that her family, at least, I don't know if it's like representative of the culture, but they're not really into that.
The cultures are very different, but are there any values that you share?
Yeah, for sure. I think education, always trying to, get smarter every day is probably the biggest thing. And we're like voracious readers, and especially in this day of misinformation galore, the value of actually knowing truths, I think, is only greater.
And what about some interests?
So I'm a diehard tennis addict. So I've luckily been able to get her on the court, and like I'm training her, and she's actually coming along really well. Can beat me on many points, so I've got to stave her off while I still can.
Yeah. And have you learned anything that she likes?
Yeah. So she's recently gotten into sailing, which is a very nice hobby, but also can be very expensive. So I'm not trying to tread down that path too quickly.
Yeah, so your jobs are very different. Do you have any relationship rituals that really keep the spark alive?
Well, we do go on frequent trips. Like part of being a digital nomad is you have to actually make use of that, right? So we're going on even small road trips around New York and surrounding states to Chicago. As corny and cheesy as it sounds, like date nights are fun because you're experiencing new things. You're going to new restaurants. You're going to a new club, and we're both big music people, so I like to dance.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite memory with each other?
I think honestly, it would be the COVID lockdown. I mean, it was just such a insane experience. One, given that we were in Canada and they locked us down for over 3 months and it was winter. So you couldn't even go to a restaurant or any establishment. And we were both, together for 24/7. Right. And this was 10 days after we met. So that's pretty intense. And, but it sort of fused us together. And we were sort of learning about COVID through that whole time. And I guess we learned about how each of us sort of handles stress and handles a completely different environment. And, and if we can handle that, I think we can handle anything.
And do you have any piece of advice for people who are looking for love or looking to get married soon?
A lot, really. I would say the first and foremost thing is you really do have to put yourself out there and risk the pain, the rejection, all of that. Because again, it's a risk-reward trade-off. Getting a small bit of pain from a few of those interactions compared to the massive gain of, finding your life partner, that's pretty obvious when you realize every day you've won.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think also the mindset. So another thing I notice is a lot of my single guy friends have a very strong narratives built in their head. Society is this way, and I've got to do X, Y, Z because of society. And I don't think those narratives are really helpful at all. So it's very much easier said than done to sort of detach yourself from that, ongoing chatter and narrative that we all have in our head. And we try and sort of describe ourselves as, this central character in the story of our lives. But I actually think if you don't think about that at all and just, again, as cliche as it sounds, try and be as much in the present, and I think you'll be happier.
Yeah, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Of course.
Thank you for watching. Like and share this video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel for more such heartwarming and wholesome content. Verona, matchmaking reimagined.